Hi, I'm Ted London, Director of the Base of the Pyramid Initiative and Senior Research Fellow at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. And today I'm here with Vijay Sharma, who's the business head for Shakti in Unilever, India, or also known as Hindustan Lever. And Vijay, thank you for spending some time with me today.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what Unilever India or Hindustan Lever is doing in terms of Shakti, why they're doing it, and kind of what the results have been so far?
Okay. Let me tell you, to begin with, Hindustan Lever is one of the biggest FMCG company in the country.
And that
FMCG is fast-moving consumer goods company in the country. We have a wide portfolio which comprises of health and hygiene products, home and personal care, personal products, then and foods, ranging from beverages to like tea and coffee to salt and atta. So it's really one of those companies which is like really big in terms of its portfolio there. It's also one of those companies which has been there in India for a long period of time, and it's really integrated very well with the Indian communities, so much so that people really think it's an Indian company, not an MNC. The reason why we actually got into Shakti, and that's important for you to get a sense of, is that while if you know a bit about the country, it's about India is a country which is largely rural in nature. Almost about 70% of the Indian population lives in villages, and these villages are really scattered all over. To give you a sense, there are about 640,000 villages in the country. All the traditional channels which we had prior to Shakti were able to reach only about a minuscule portion of these villages. So we were able to reach about, let's say, about 60,000-70,000 of these villages, and so there was a huge number of villages which were still there in the country, which were either underserved or not served at all. HLL in its portfolio had products which were really relevant and meant for these communities and these villages. What was needed was really to set up a distribution channel which would allow us to actually gain access to these villages. The reason why it's difficult for traditional channels to actually go and make a viable proposition in distributing products in these villages is because A, they are scattered all over, and the size of these villages per se are very small. So there are these villages which are like 2,000 population or less. Almost about 75% of these villages are in population which is lower than 2,000, and so they really do not get the right kind of viability because the market is not really so big. At the same time, there were issues in terms of really reaching them. How do you really reach them? So these were essentially the challenges because of which the direct distribution was not really reaching there, and so came in Shakti, and Shakti was started at that point in time. It started somewhere around 2000 at the turn of century, because rural was seen as one of the biggest growth opportunities for the company as we moved on, and from there, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been able to perfect a model by which we can reach these villages on a sustainable basis.
So what really drove Shakti to, or Unilever, Hindustan Lever, to say that we want to go into these rural markets? I mean, what was the value that you saw in doing this?
See, we did a Millennium Project, which happened sometime from 1998 or so, and there we were looking at various growth opportunities for the company in times to come, with a slightly futuristic vision, which is about 5, 10, 15 years kind of a plan. And we realized that rural per se is one of those segments which is really going to grow as infrastructure goes in, as the living standards change, as people get more and more access to products and to services. That was one place where we felt that it's going to really grow in a very big way. But then we realized that there is no set distribution channel by which we will be able to reach there, and therefore there was a need to look at something which was very different and innovative, and which answered these kind of challenges which were there. So the reason to begin with was to say that yes, there is a business opportunity there, and how do we really go about doing it?
So you saw a business opportunity in the rural markets. It's an area that Unilever, Hindustan Lever wanted to explore. Can you tell us kind of what is Shakti? What's the real business model behind it?
Yeah. See, when we were exploring as to what kind of model to set up, we looked at what is happening in that part of the country, and so we really immersed ourselves in rural India, so to say. We also looked at what's happening across the globe in these kind of markets. One of the things which actually drew from where we drew a lot of inspiration was the Grameen Bank model, which was there, which essentially worked on the principle of providing microfinance to people, and microfinance along with micro enterprise opportunity was being used to make them overcome poverty. And that was something which really interested us a lot. And if you look at how Shakti was built, it was also built on that, because what we saw was that in India also there was a resurgence of let's say the self-help group movement and the microfinance movement which was coming in there, and we thought with HLL and with the business of distributing HLL products, one could really make a good micro enterprise opportunity for them. That's how the idea of Shakti actually started off. So what we did was that we went into the villages, tried to figure out as to which are the SHGs who are working there, and we saw that, and we tried and identify those women who were in need of a micro enterprise opportunity, and there we linked them up with microfinance institutes so that they could get a small starter working capital, by which they could actually take HLL stocks. Then we had a training session to train them, and then set up their own business of distribution. So that's how it really started off, and of course it has been refined as we've gone over the last few years. So what Shakti actually became was that it became a business initiative. However, it also became a very, very strong income generating opportunity medium, or a channel by which we could actually give opportunities to the underprivileged women to earn their livelihood.
So let's talk about those two. It's a business initiative for Hindustan Lever. What has been the outcome from a business perspective of doing this? How has Hindustan Lever done? What value has been created for the company?
Well, I think tremendous value. And to begin with, one of the first objectives was how do we reach small villages? And today we cover an additional 100,000 villages in the country. The reach of HLL products, direct reach of HLL products, has more than doubled, and that's one number which actually keeps on growing, because now the model is more, it's stable, and we know what to do and how to really do it. So that's one thing that we have now been able to have a direct reach in close to about 100,000 villages, and in a few years' time we'll be reaching about 400 or 500,000 villages. So that's one big tick mark, if I would say. The second tick mark for the company is that the company has been able to, Shakti has contributed to a large extent to the growth of the company per se. And today, about 40% of the rural growths actually come from Shakti. So it's therefore becoming one big growth earner for the company. Last but not the least, it also provides you with an opportunity to build relationship of HLL's brands with the communities, and thereby bringing in loyalty there. This is what's happening on, let's say, if I were to look at it at a bit of a short-term basis. But to us, what's really also very exciting is this whole idea of actually building in awareness on health and hygiene, which really raises the standards of quality in these communities which we serve in, and that's something which the company also benefits from, but the communities benefit a lot more. So that's something which Shakti does.
Now, I want to come back to the community benefit for a second. You had mentioned a couple of things. One was that it was 40% of Shakti's rural growth. Can you put sort of some numbers behind that? How much incremental sales have you been able to generate from this? And can you talk a little bit about the cost benefit that Shakti's seeing out of this in terms of both short and long term?
Okay. I guess on the exact numbers, 40% growth, 40% rural growth is a number which is quite substantial for us, and it's therefore one of those very important initiatives for the company, and it's therefore watched by, or rather there's inputs from the top, and almost everybody is glued into it because it's very substantial. I'm sorry, what was your second question?
When you think about the cost benefit, Unilever made an investment to do this. How much was the investment, or can you talk about that, and what kind of returns are they seeing so far?
Yeah. Well, because it was setting up a new channel per se, of course it came in with huge amount of upfront investments which were made. Uh, it took us about 2.5, 3 years to break even, if that gives you a sense. So for about 3 years, we were just sticking on, because we knew that, yeah, this is where we had to go. So it did take us that time, and thank God we had, and the company had the patience and the commitment behind it to pull it through. But after 3 years, it's broken even, and it's pretty profitable in that sense. So from 2004 onwards, we have been making pretty good profits in this.
So it's something that, as a company, you want to stick with because it makes business sense?
It does. It does. It does make a huge business sense, and I guess this is going to be one of the key areas as we move forward for the entire company. And one of the key areas is going to be seeing as to how do we not only scale it up at a much faster pace, but also what kind of role do we give to Shakti as a channel.
Can you elaborate a little more on that last statement? The role you're going to give Shakti as a channel?
Yeah, which is how do we strengthen our brands? How do we use Shakti as a market development channel, and not only as a distribution channel? So it's therefore also building markets for the company.
And there's clearly some societal impacts. So there's benefits of the company, but part of Shakti is that you want to also generate value at the local level. Can you talk a little bit about the value you think you're generating locally?
Yeah, Shakti is one of those initiatives which is, let's say, a win-win initiative. So it's a win-win in almost everything we do. The first thing which comes to our mind is that how does it help us, and how does it help the community? So that's one of the core philosophies on which Shakti is built. If I look at communities, then there are some direct impacts which are in the region of, for example, providing livelihoods to families and women in particular. The women which we recruit for to be a Shakti entrepreneur typically comes from a very underprivileged status. She is really in need of an income generating opportunity. So there are about 30,000 families today who are actually sustaining their livelihoods because of Shakti. So that's one big impact, which is a direct impact to the entrepreneur on the economic side. On the human side, the entrepreneurs actually gain far more confidence because they have been able to overcome those barriers and are now economically independent. They have greater mobility within the community and within the society, and they've got far greater confidence. So what it also does is that they start acting as some kind of a role model for the community. And seeing her, there are others who actually start off on other kind of enterprise. And because it's a small set of people who are living together, they do tend to share notes, and they do tend to, the Shakti entrepreneur does help the new ones who want to start up their own business in terms of what to do and how to do. So, so that's the second thing which happens on the societal side. Third, and perhaps another important one, is that the community actually gains access to quality products which improves their quality of life. The health and hygiene awareness actually goes up, and one could actually classify these impacts in lots of ways, but to give you an example, we know that there are about 300,000 deaths every year for kids who die out of because of diarrhea, and it's proven that if you were to follow basic hygiene practices like washing your hands, that incidence could drop by 50. Now, that if we were to actually put into place, I don't know how you will quantify the impact, but it's like saving lives also. So it's in that sense improving the quality of life at the community, which is also a big plus.
And when you kind of, obviously you've had some experience now with Shakti, and it's gone on since 2000, so it's coming up to its 6th year anniversary. What have you learned? What has really what things surprised you, and what have you learned as Shakti has evolved over these past few years? What has the company learned?
Yeah. There in fact a list of learnings which are there with Shakti, and one of the good things with Shakti is that the learnings have been passed on, and not really, I mean, it's not just hidden in some books. I guess for me the first and foremost is this whole belief of how do you really look at people, even poor people. Do you look at them as liabilities, or do you look at them as resources? Shakti values them, and Shakti looks at them as resources, and that's the minute you start looking at that, and the minute you start, the minute your mindset becomes that, it's a I mean, it opens up a whole world of opportunity. So it's therefore the respect and human value, and then saying that, I mean, they're resources and not really liability. So that's one. From a from, let's say, running the operations, I guess the core of Shakti is about training and development and people. So one can't, and that's something which has always stuck on. So if I were to talk about day-to-day jobs, I mean, it has to be training. Who did you train today? Who did you develop today is what almost everybody asks on the field. From a company perspective, I guess one of the biggest learnings has been that patience and commitment is really key when you're looking at building new structures and new channels. And we have stuck it out, and so that's one thing which has been really great. So you need commitment behind it, and you need to be patient while that structure is being set up. Apart from that, there are new skill sets which we have ourselves developed as a company, and these skill sets are more in terms of how do you look at partnerships, because if you were to set up Shakti in a village, you would need partnerships from various places. We had never spoken, or I mean, at an operational level, we had not spoken to the NGOs or the government agencies or to the MFI banks, and now here we were, or let's say the team who was actually going and talking to an MFI for a loan of, let's say, 10,000 rupees. Never ever done that. So these are like really new skills of how do you really talk to them and how do you really partner them. So those are skills that we have picked up. Apart from that, I guess there has been a lot of openness in the system, which is saying that as you go along, you will learn, and when you learn, you need to then put it back into action and then say as to what kind of effect it's taking, and then learn again. Because if we hadn't gone through those cycles, we would have very easily said at some point in time saying that it's not working and let's just get out of it. But we didn't do that, so we actually learned the entire process in our journey. Also understand that the basic operation of a Shakti entrepreneur is about selling home to home, and the selling home to home expertise is really not there in the country. Forget about selling home to home in a rural environment. So these are the new skills which let's say the entrepreneurs have developed themselves, but the system has been such that they've in a way cherished all of that, collected all of that, and made sure that the new guys or the new entrepreneurs who come in actually take that on. So we have in that sense may become more of a learning organization. So which was very different from what, let's say, HLL is known otherwise, because there are set systems, processes, and you know what to do and how to do it, and you just go there and do it. So this has been therefore a very different kind of atmosphere.
As you think about where you are and what you're doing, you certainly have some challenges you have to address, and some questions might emerge around environmental waste, or are we really putting forward more of a Western consumer value towards these to people in the rural communities, imposing Western values. Have you given some thought to that, and how would you kind of react to those comments around Shakti?
Yeah, see, as we move forward, my sense is that yes, there is lots of work to be done, and okay, let me put it this way. One is that how do you really now leverage the Shakti network to do beyond distribution of products, and that's something which to me is very exciting. So you look at Shakti and you say, okay, can we use this network to deliver not only goods, but how can we let good flow through it? So what is the kind of other social impact initiatives which you can take through that, because now you have a network which is established. So who do you really partner with? And there are a few pilots which are already on, which are in the area of health and hygiene, which we are doing currently, and we can always scale it up if they actually prove successful. That's one. Second is that even in the risk part of it, and when we say things like the environmental impact, you could either look at it as a problem or a challenge which is there. Equally, you could look at that as an opportunity, which is that how can Shakti now play a larger role in making sure that the environmental waste or impact because of that is minimized. So you can actually start off something with Shakti. So that's perhaps the advantage of having this kind of network. and because it's also small and it's also evolving, I don't think it's small, but because it's, let's say, fairly young and it's evolving, it has the power or potential to actually evolve in a way where you can leverage it in much better way, and that's perhaps a challenge for us.
So that kind of leads to the next question: is you now have 25,000 entrepreneurs, 30,000 entrepreneurs, reaching over 100,000 villages.
That's right.
What are the next steps as you think, over the next, 2, 3, 5 years? Where do you see Shakti going from here?
Yeah. Clearly, two directions which we need to look at. First is how do we really scale it up from 30,000 to 100,000, and that's one of those things which my entire team is working on. The second is that how do I make Shakti larger than a distribution channel, and therefore how do I build in programs and initiatives under it which will impact the community, which will impact the entrepreneur, and which will impact the company and its brands. So clearly these two directions which are there. Of course, in this we'll have to get down into specifics and see as to how we really build these. There's a third one which is more in terms of how do you really organize the entire Shakti entrepreneur, because what we've done is we've so far empowered, let's say, the underprivileged women. The whole thought is how do we really empower the network now, and that's again one of those interesting things which I'm working on.
Do you have any, can you be a little more specific about any new initiatives that you have underway or thinking about that would kind of address the second or third points in terms of, as you said, doing more good or more things beyond just scaling the existing network?
Yeah, for example, one of the initiatives which we have, which is currently under pilot, is that how do we use Shakti's distribution network to build solutions for diarrhea management. And we are partnering with, we've just put in a pilot which is about distribution of ORS also. So while Lifebuoy is on the preventive side of diarrhea, then there is ORS which comes in, which is oral rehydration solution, which would then be available as Shakti entrepreneur in case a kid has a diarrhea, and therefore make sure that the incidence of deaths, etc., actually reduce or gets eliminated by that. So that's one program which is happening on the diarrhea management bit. Similarly, there are other pilots which are happening on along with, for example, how can we give the distribution to people like Skojo, and therefore how can we actually share vision entrepreneurs with them. So those are the kind of pilots which are happening on leveraging Shakti. On the other bit about how do I look at this network and how do I really make it empowered, one of those interesting things we are working on is this whole concept of a council, which is that about 20 or 25 of these entrepreneurs together form a family, and each of them is headed by one of the members who is elected by this family, and these then get at a state level, and there is a state council of Shakti and then a national council of Shakti, and we actually have a constant dialogue with them, not only on the things which we have to do, but also what we should be doing, and they play an active role in taking these on. And some of these meetings have happened, and I've also seen them and been there with them. They are pretty excited about that we will get to, in a manner of speaking, we'll be empowered enough to handle the entire network ourselves, and we decide what goes in, what doesn't. The second thing on that bit is we're trying to see if we can use mobile phones and connect these entrepreneurs, because again mobile phones is a great win-win initiative, because it gives extra income to the entrepreneur. At the same time, mobile phone could be used for a whole lot of purposes by the company themselves. It could be used as a tool for logistics, it could be used as an MR tool, it could be used as sending communication to them. So again, one of those things, at the heart of which is win-win. So these are some of those things which are as of now happening, and we are piloting them, and I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be able to make a lot of difference.
Sort of the last two you talked about, creating this ability to have the Shakti Amas actually have a network where their voices can be heard and moving up, through a kind of not a political structure, but sort of like a self-help structure where they're banded together. And the second one, the mobile phones, you're now giving them more voice.
That's right.
How does that create value for the company?
See, it does in lots of ways. For example, just the fact that each and every entrepreneur is getting taken care of or looked after is a plus for the company. Second, in terms of if you need to roll out anything or any program, if you have a greater participation with them, it becomes all the more easier. Third, as I was telling you, that Shakti is about a learning experience, and it's best shared amongst the entrepreneurs themselves. They know much better how to do a home to home than I would, or for that matter, anybody in my team would. It's best if they actually become coaches for the new ones. So it does therefore shorten the cycle of learning, because you're then learning from the experience of each other. So it's making the network far more stronger, and therefore it benefits the company.
Okay. My last question is, as you reflect back on your experiences, and if you ran into someone who's saying, I really want to start a business or a venture at the base of the pyramid, what advice would you give them to get started?
Okay, but to begin with, you need to be really, really serious that you want to be here, because you will need to stick on for a long period of time. You will have to, I would say, at times you will might actually even go wrong, but then it's okay. If you're clear with your purpose, and if you have the commitment, then come in. That's first. Second is that even in these places, always think about sustainability, or let's say something which is going to last for a long period of time. And if we have to think of that, you need to really ask yourselves, okay, so what's the competitive advantage which I have? And competitive advantage is not only for you as a company, but it's also for somebody who is either going to get associated with you, because that works for him or her as well. And therefore, it's important to make sure that the business lasts over a period of time and it's sustainable. So these are primarily, let's say, the two big ones which I would say. So have a heart to really learn as you go along, and have this kind of commitment behind it, a very, very deep sense of commitment behind it. Second, even in BOP, do everything which actually gives you competitive advantage, because it's not only the company, or it's not only you who's doing it. There is fortunes, or there is, let's say, livelihood of others which is also dependent on that, who are going to get associated with you. And if there is competitive advantage, it's only then that it will be sustainable for a long period of time.
Vijay, thank you very much for talking today. I'm looking forward to future collaborations.
Of course, I would love to. Thanks a lot, Ed.